You're listening to Thursday Night AMP on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
AngryMarks.com pro wrestling and mixed martial arts podcast. My name is Stevie J. We'll have a special guest on the line in just a little bit, but I already have a special someone on the line, my co-host, the great Sudoku, Jason Harlan. Good evening.
Good evening, and Angry Marks, get ready because tomorrow morning, the greatest mullet in the entire universe is coming to New Japan.
That's right, it's going to be Fantasticamania.
Fantasticamania, yeah, and the main event is Gato, Okada, and Ultimo Guerrero, who has the ultimate mullet, taking on Stupid Tana and his stupid hair, Mystico in Atlanta. So definitely, I don't know if I'm going to check it out live in the morning. It might not be worth waking up at whatever stupid o'clock hour it is to catch it live, but I'll definitely watch it later in the day, because Ultimo Guerrero has one fantastic mullet.
How did that not end up as a Luchas de Apuestas hair versus hair match?
Tanahashi versus Ultimo Guerrero?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Somebody should have put their hair up or square up for that.
And Gato's beard?
Yeah, I'll take that too. Anybody, as long as somebody loses some hair.
Put that on the table too.
Well, speaking of putting it on the table, I'm putting New Year's Dash on the table. What did you think of that show?
It's one of those ones where I've read about it, but I really haven't had enough interest to go back and watch it. Like, I know Jericho showed up afterwards and attacked Naito, and I know those Never Six-Man titles changed hands, but it's just one of those things where my opinion of Wrestle Kingdom 12 was so low, I wasn't excited like I was in years past to go out and watch New Year's Dash. And it's kind of to the point where it's like I've read about what's gone on, and to me it's kind of like, well, that's enough.
See, I feel like I had the exact opposite reaction. Each time I've gone back and watched a piece of Wrestle Kingdom 12, I think my opinion has gone up little by little with each successive viewing. I feel like the booking was something you can criticize, but the actual in-ring action, bell to bell, pretty hard to critique.
Perhaps. I mean, some of the action was good. Switchblade and Tanahashi, not so much.
Yeah, that one was a little more mediocre than the rest, but I'll say this, the main event, Naito and Okada, gets better with each viewing, and that's me being a big Naito mark and being upset that they didn't put him over, and I still got to admit that was a hell of a match.
See, for me it has whatever, I think it was King of Pro Wrestling where, and I think it happened with Omega too, where I think it was Omega was on right in the second to last spot, and then Tanahashi had an Intercontinental match as the final match, and I just couldn't get into it because the match before it was so high energy and high intensity. And that's kind of what happened at Wrestle Kingdom here with me. That was so hyped up for Jericho and Omega that I just was not into the main event at all.
That's why I'm saying you gotta go back and watch it a second time, because I felt the same way before. It was like Omega Jericho was the peak of the show, and then on repeat viewing, it's like, you know what? This Naito Okada match was better than I gave it credit for, just because I was so jaded by Omega and Jericho.
I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of in Abby's camp now of Okada being this John Cena-like Superman that never loses, and I will have to go back and watch the match again, but to me it doesn't really seem like Okada has pulled out anything new. It just kind of seems it's the same 5 moves of doom that Okada does. Granted, it's better than Cena's 5 moves of doom, and seeing him drop kick somebody off the top turnbuckle to the outside is a thing of beauty, but I mean, you've seen a tombstone into a Rainmaker once, you've seen it 1,000 times.
I get where you're coming from. I just think that on repeat viewing of it, I feel like it's not that Naito couldn't beat Okada. I think the match told the story that he was every bit on Okada's level. I think the story here that we take away from that match is he made one and only one mistake, and it cost him. And if he had that same match with Okada, he would win because he wouldn't make that one mistake.
Well, there were two mistakes that he made. The first was not pinning him after the Destino, lifting him up and going for a second one. The other one was trying to go old school and going with that Stardust press move that he did, way back before he even did Glory as a finisher, trying to go old school Naito.
Mm-hmm. So either one of those, but I think I was specifically thinking of not pinning him after the Destino.
Yeah, that was not smart, but yeah, again, I was not a fan of the booking, and I'm not. It's the time to put the title on Naito to do going forward, especially if Naito is going to be in a feud with Chris Jericho. While I like that, I kind of don't like that means that Naito is going to be out of the title hunt.
I'm starting to see a little bit of the bigger picture because I'm looking at the booking for upcoming shows like Long Beach and future plans that I keep hearing are on the table like Jericho and Okada. And I'm starting to think to myself, okay, if Omega just signed for another year, which hit all the websites today, we all know that he's there through January 31st, 2019, and Omega wants to be the guy that leads the charge of making New Japan truly global and getting it over in the United States, Canada, Europe, and everywhere else. And they're doing this thing with Okada being the best Japanese pro wrestler ever, which seems to be the gimmick they've aligned him with now. Just imagine if in another year's time, after Okada has gone on another magnificent journey through this entire year of having great matches, if Omega finally unseats him at Wrestle Kingdom 13. How awesome would that be?
They've kind of painted themselves into a corner, though, when they got into the situation last year with, or a little, if we're moving forward a few months, but like almost a year ago, give or take a few months, when they got into the situation with Kenny Omega and they said, well, we really don't have a belt for you. What are we going to do with you? We don't want to lose you to WWE. Oh, hey, how about we create a belt for you? They can't really do that for Naito after what he did with the Intercontinental title. They can't really give Naito the Intercontinental title either after what he did with the Intercontinental title. As much as it would make sense with Tanahashi injured right now, you really just can't go backwards with that. You can't really create a belt for Naito. That's the belt that he needs to have. He needs the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, and Wrestle Kingdom was the time to pull the trigger on that, and they just didn't.
Well, you're not really going to get an argument from me as the biggest Tetsuya Naito mark I know, but I feel more generous the more I watch Wrestle Kingdom 12, especially the more I watch WWE and Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling by comparison to Wrestle Kingdom 12. It really starts to illustrate to you just how good of a show that was when you have to watch such mediocre bullshit from everybody else.
And I guess that's a lot of my position, too. It's kind of like what Worf said to Alexander Rozchenko, just because you're my son, that means I expect twice as much from you. And that's what I expect from New Japan. Just because everything else is such shit doesn't mean I'm going to give New Japan a free pass. I tend not to watch the other shit. I watch New Japan, and every other year in Wrestle Kingdom, there have been, 2 matches on the Wrestle Kingdom card that could have been Match of the Year candidates, and this year I felt there was only one.
Well, I understand that, but we'll continue this discussion a little later because right now I'm going to get our special guest on the line. Are you ready?
Sure am.
All right, let's give him a call.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Thomas.
What's up, Steve?
Hey, not much. Hey, it's Stevie J, and I've got my co-host Jason, a.k.a. Great Sudoku, on the line. Jason, Mr. Thomas.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great, man. What's up?
Oh, we were talking some New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Sweet.
That's actually why
Everyone's
we posted.
Talking.
Yeah, and that's why we posted on this last week, because you said you hadn't seen Wrestle Kingdom 12, so I didn't want to put you right in the thick of that discussion last week.
No, I saw, I actually, up here in the Northeast, I live in Massachusetts, we had Thursday and Friday off. I'm a school teacher, so, Friday night I got to watch, I couldn't watch it Thursday night, but, Friday night I got to catch the whole thing, and I'm very, I have attention problems and very ADD like, and so it's hard for me to watch and sit and watch something for 5 hours, let alone an hour. But I did it, and it was I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was every match was different. I'm sure we heard that before, on the recent podcasts and shows, but really every match was different. They all started different. They all, it was great.
Yeah. Well, did you find that you were drawn mostly to the Omega Jericho match? Because a lot of people have been saying that was their favorite, and I was just telling Jason before he came on the line that each time I watch it, the Okada-Naito match gets a little better.
Those two are both my favorite, and then just because it's not as, the Omega Jericho match is obviously the one that was, getting the most buzz coming in. And it's going to be the one that people remember for years down the road because of, Jericho leaving WWE for a little bit or whatever. The match that I put up there with those other two was the opening tag match. I love that. I love that match, and being a tag team guy for a good portion of my career early on. I just loved it. That was the most, I think that I can remember. That was, probably my favorite Young Bucks match, that I can remember. But yeah, I was drawn to Jericho and Omega, and, I was kind of fast forwarding through in between the matches and just to kind of get there, and it didn't let me down. It was just a fun match. Watching it, I felt like a kid again. I felt like I did when I was watching Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon ladder match. I felt like I was watching Hogan and Rock, where you're just, it was just fun. And, and then for different reasons, the main event was, I was just as into that match as I was the Omega Jericho, just from a worker's perspective, watching, and the suspense and thinking, okay, Naito, this is going to be it. Naito's got to get the title. And then, no, he doesn't.
Yeah. And that was the argument I was kind of having with Jason, is that I feel like it's the denied expectations might actually lead to greater expectations. Like, I really wanted Naito to win coming into this show, and I was so heartbroken that he didn't, but no pun intended when I say heartbroken, by the way. But, I just think now, in hindsight, like, okay, what if he wins later? Or what if Omega beats Okada later? Now that anticipation is built up even more.
Yeah, I think you have more challengers than ever now. Who's to say Jericho doesn't after Okada? Who knows if he's going to stick around, and, Okada has a title defense against him, who knows with Jay White, what's Jay White's next match? Is it Tanahashi, or I think it's Tanahashi again, right?
Jason, I'll defer to you on that.
He's going after Omega, I believe, because he's
going after Omega, but
he turned on the Bullet Club. He swerved the Bullet Club and joined Chaos.
Yeah, I know. I saw that, but the matches that they came out this week with the schedule for, I don't think he's wrestling Omega on those. I could be wrong.
Not until after Fantasticomania.
Okay.
Not until one of the 2 or 3 New Beginning shows.
Right. And Okada versus Jericho is definitely the hot rumor right now that they'll do that in Long Beach when they come back to the United States.
Or Naito.
It could be him as
I've got no problem with Okada versus Jericho as long as they don't put the title on Jericho. That's one where I'm fine with Okada holding the title. I just want to see a fantastic match there.
I want to see a fantastic match. I think having the no DQ stip and having a lot of the tables and the brawling, I think that helped the match. So it'd be interesting. To see, Jericho and Okada in just a straight match. I'd love to see it. so yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's so many possibilities, and it's going to be a fun year. It's going to be hard to top last year, but it's a good start.
Well, speaking of fun matches, I want to talk to you about something that you've been doing recently, and you referenced your past, and for those who don't know, when we're talking to Antonio the Promise Thomas, that past includes the Heartbreakers / Heartthrobs in OVW and WWE. That's where I first got to know him. But now, you're taking things back to the future, as it were. So, why don't you tell everybody about this new evolution of your character?
The Heartthrobs, Heartbreakers, I mean, that was on that's how people know me maybe the best, when they hear my name. That was just a small, very, very small part of my career. I mean, I've been wrestling for 17 years, and this is my 17th year, and, a few years ago, I was just, after 14 years, 15 years, and pretty much 10 of it doing it full time and owning my own ring, training guys, and then eventually getting another a full time job and going back into teaching and going for my master's. I just got kind of burnt out. I wanted to do some different things, and I just kind of got burned out on wrestling. I just never really had an identity. I was always changing my look, changing my hair, changing my gear, and just trying to find something that felt right. And, long story short, because of my hair, I had a lot of fans were chanting George McFly at matches. And so, two of my best friends are huge Back to the Future fans, and they're just like, just go with it. Just do it. You look like him. And people said that I would look like him when, I would dress up for my teaching job, and they'd giggle, my friends, yeah, I look like George McFly, blah, blah, blah. So, I went with it, and the first time I did it was up in Vancouver, and the first time I felt really, really comfortable in the ring, and it felt natural, and I didn't have to be myself. I could change my name and kind of start over again. And that's what I've been doing the last few years. And right now I'm just looking, it's different. I've now, as opposed to when I was first on a worldwide stage with WWE and OVW, I was very green, very young then. Now I have 17 years of experience. I have a whole bunch of amateur, and MMA experience, not fighting, but, I train and, for the past 7 years in 4 or 5 times a week in, no-gi grappling, submission grappling, striking, boxing. So that's all helped me evolve my in-ring style as well. And so now I really feel like a complete package. My body feels great. And, I feel like I have a new life, and it's fun. It's really, really fun. After really not wanting to wrestle and just not caring if I ever wrestled again for a few years.
So now, what I heard about that show, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was ECCW, is that the crowd popped really big because you came out to the song Earth Angel from Back to the Future.
Yeah, that's what I come out to. Yeah, they didn't know what to think of me. A lot of people don't kind of know what to think, think it's a comedy character and whatnot, which it can be. That's the fun of it, is playing it as, in front of different crowds, in front of different, with different opponents, as a heel, as a baby, in tag matches, and I've done both. But yeah, they didn't really pop when I came out, but when the match started and I kind of did a complete 180, they really popped. And it was perfect because it was a real kind of, I don't want to say hardcore crowd, but it was very hipster, kind of, very much like a Beyond Wrestling crowd, I guess.
A crowd where you have to really impress them and really make them get into it.
I don't think really impressed them. It wasn't like a early 2000s Jersey All Pro or Ring of Honor, but it was it's I don't know, I guess like a Wrestle Circus crowd or like a Beyond Wrestling crowd where they were there to see good wrestling, but they wanted to be entertained. And I did that.
So a little bit of a Chikara crowd too, then.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah.
Which I think actually would be a great place to do this character. I think if you did that, one of Mike Quackenbush's shows, I think everybody would eat it up right away.
It'd be great. I've had contacted him last year, but nothing came about of it. But I would love, I worked for Chikara a lot before. That's the only place where, I did the Heartbreaker gimmick other than OVW, because I've never done the Heartthrob or Heartbreaker gimmick after WWE, but just there for Chikara, because that was the only place I would do it, or wanted to do it, frankly. So yeah, I would love to go back, and I really want to go everywhere, because I feel it's something. I feel my in-ring is better. It's absolutely better than ever. I think my mind for it is better than ever. My experience, and it's just something different. And I feel like I'm, a hungry, young, independent guy starting out. But except I have, 16, 17 years of experience and trial and error behind me.
Right. Now I've got 2 questions related to the gimmick, and then I'm going to tag in Jason for a few questions. But the first one is, how tempting is it when you get in there with somebody who's at your size or a little bit larger, and you're doing this character, to do the big George McFly, Biff Tannen Hope spot where you throw the one punch and knock him on his ass?
I've had that, I've only done that once, and I didn't land the punch, and that's something I'm working on, where I like to go by a lot of feel in the ring, and that's something that I definitely have to incorporate and work. But I actually I had my Heartthrob tag team partner, Romeo Roselli, manage me last year in Poughkeepsie, New York. He was my Biff, and he came out kind of bullying me and being like Biff. And then after the match, I went to go to throw the punch, just like in the movie. And the crowd, I could hear the crowd rising, and it was a good crowd too. It was about 1,500 people. And I could hear the crowd rising and cheering for me, and then he stopped, and we didn't do it, and that was even better, because the crowd all of a sudden just came down. But yeah, that's something absolutely. I don't think I would do that in front of a Evolve or a Ring of Honor crowd. You never know, but that's definitely something I got to start doing on more shows. Thank you for reminding me.
And thank you for putting that idea in my head now, because I love the idea of Romeo Roselli as Biff Tannen getting knocked out. That would be so much fun to watch.
It's it's great. I haven't had it very few times. I've been a heel. So I'm sorry, a baby face. Most of the time I'm a heel. So it'd be perfect for a baby face. Yeah.
Speaking of things you could do as a baby face, there's a very famous New Japan Pro Wrestling tag team time traveling duo, Kushida and Alex Shelley, the Time Splitters. Have you thought about hooking up with Kushida to do a little Back to the Future of your own with the 2 of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I mean, who wouldn't want to? Just tell me when and where, and get me there somehow, and I'll do it. That's not even oh my God, that's like at the top of the bucket list for the Thomas Santell character.
Excellent. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, because he's got some more Japanese wrestling to throw at you.
Yeah, I do. I'm going to keep it obscure, and me being the Japanese wrestling mark that I am, we'll kind of keep it a little sidetracked on that Kushida topic. But back in 2008, you got to wrestle current New Japan wrestler Sonata. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, that was, I worked for All Japan from 2008 to 2010. And, yeah, Sonata was just a young boy back then with Bushi. I think he was only 20 years old then, with Bushi, Kai, there's a couple other, I'm trying to think any, Yamato, Hama was there, shortly after I started there. But yeah, I worked a lot with Sonata, obviously in the dojo training, and then we had a couple singles matches together. I remember the singles match too. It was the opening match, during the junior heavyweight tournament in 2008 during one of those shows. And, it was great. He was a true young boy back then, had just blue tights, white boots, and, actually teamed with him a lot and worked against him a lot. And he was great. It's funny because he's one of those guys that has this awesome sense of humor and personality, and you don't really see it in the ring, kind of like a Dean Malenko. I can't think of anyone else right now, but, yeah, it's only just, you could tell back then, I mean, he could do anything really physically. I mean, the guy was benching 405 back then as a 20-year-old and, doing springboards and backflips and all. He's a physical freak, and it's only a matter of time before that personality comes out.
That's something here. He's got a funny side. You did get to work with some legends over there in All Japan, guys.
He loves Full House, too.
Is he a Kimmy Gibbler fan?
Yeah. I think he's more of a Dave Coulier fan. So
I'm just picturing Sonata going, "Cut it out."
And Laura, yeah, he would say, we would have me and another kid from Canada that would say there a lot. Phil Atlas would have him say a lot of Full House lines. So we're all big Lori Loughlin fans.
Sonata pulls out a 2x4. Is it made of wood?
Oh, shit.
But yeah, there were some guys you got to work with over there in All Japan. Guys like El Samurai and Kaz Hayashi and Taiokeya and Akabono. What was the experience like working with some of those legends over there in Japan?
They were all different. Masakatsu Funaki, who along with Ken Shamrock and Minoru Suzuki started Pancrase. Never got to work against Minoru Suzuki. I was we were all super afraid at the time to work with him.
People are still afraid of him.
Yeah, but, looking back, man, fuck it. I would have, it would have been worth shitting my pants, but, Kaz Hayashi, Minoru, Tanaka, just two of the smoothest guys I've probably ever been in the ring with, and just light, and it's really a night off. And El Samurai actually, there's another guy that's my final show on my first tour there. It was a Sunday show in a country town where the opening match, and he doesn't speak English, but hip toss and body slam is the same in any language. So we went out, I said I like to go by a lot of feel, kind of feel things out in the ring. And, he had his set comeback, and we had our set kind of, finishing sequence, but, we just went in there and just rolled around and played around and had fun. And, really it was, one of my favorite matches. And, that, I really like doing that. I liked having those opening matches against a guy like El Samurai, Sonata, Knockaway, a lot of the younger guys, and then some of the veteran guys, where you're not going out there to steal the show, but you're having a solid B match, and give me that every night. That's what I'm. I was very happy to work with guys like that. Akabono, I teamed with him. It was interesting because I'm teaming with him against.
He's not the typical junior heavyweight that they throw you in there with most of the time. He's a big dude.
They're with Akibono and with, and then I'm going against Viscera and another member of the Voodoo Murders. They're really, what there wasn't a lot you can do in that match, being under 200 pounds. So you're just there to kind of take the pin and do what you can. Do a lot of flying, and having them catch you. Splashes off of standing on Akabono's shoulders, like the old Jimmy Snuka, Andre the Giant, except I was nothing like Jimmy Snuka.
Sounds like fun, though. How did you enjoy being in Japan as a whole? Because I always talk to wrestlers when they've been to Japan, and some love it, and some have a hard time adjusting to it. What was your experience like?
No, I loved it. I loved it from the moment I got there. It was different. It was culture shock, especially the first month or two. Because I lived there, and and we go over there for 2-3 months at a time. And I love living in the dojo and immersing myself in training, and you get homesick like anyone would, but I loved it. I would go back there, if I had a regular gig there, I'd drop my job and go back there in a heartbeat.
Well, maybe we can get you there with a little more exposure on this podcast. But speaking of podcasts,
that would be great. Let's do it.
Yeah, but you've got a new one of your own. I left my wallet in Greg Polanco. I gotta get it. I got to get it.
Yeah. I talk fantasy sports and sports with other workers, other wrestlers, and people within wrestling. And then I talk to sports and fantasy analysts about wrestling and about, of course, sports. It's just the two things that have been the constants in my life and my two loves. Just put them together. No one else was doing it. You'll have other podcasts where they'll touch on sports, or wrestling will talk about sports briefly. But this one is completely about that. So it's super, super niche. It's really, I do all the editing. I do everything myself. It's kind of ghetto editing, but, it's organic and rough and kind of, a little bit out there, but that's me, and that's the way I like it. It's my own personal touch, and I can do it the way I want, and it's fun.
You must not have done too much editing. Oh, sorry. I thought you stopped there. I was going to say go ahead.
I was just going to say it's fun. It's a lot of work, but what isn't a lot of work that's worth doing?
Right. But when it comes to editing, you probably didn't do too much editing with Rip Rogers, because if you did, it'd just be beep for a whole hour.
No, well, that's the thing. No, I don't. It's all one take. I don't edit out swears. I got the little E next to my thing, and that's the way I want it. I want it natural. It's conversations. It's not interviews. It's I had Rip on twice, and both times I talked to him, and I talked to him off the record too, and just on the phone in general or text. And he always says, can I swear? And I was like, fuck yeah, be yourself, man. It's about being yourself, and the editing, it's all one take. The editing is me just putting it together, putting the songs, the intros, all that stuff, and just kind of, blending it together for the full show. But the interview or the talk with whoever, I have on, that's really not edited unless we have a technical problem. I had that with, my current episode with Disco Inferno. I was getting some feedback on my mic. So for about a minute, it was, a little haywire. So I had to chop that out. It's the only editing I'll do within within the chat.
Mm-hmm. I try to edit for dead air when I stall or forget to say something, or there's just a question that doesn't have a good answer. But generally, I try to do the same thing too. I just let it all hang. Even if it's good, bad, or indifferent, I figure, what the heck, go for it. That's the fun of podcasting.
Nah, it's calling it on the fly, man. We call it in the ring, and I just had a show I'm going to drop tomorrow, which is Friday the 12th. Guy who become a good friend of mine, he's by the name of Lenny Melnick. He's a fantasy sports Hall of Fame, Fantasy Sports Writers Hall of Famer. One of the first guys to have a baseball radio show or podcast, 25 years ago, talking fantasy sports. And I'm going to have him on tomorrow. And, it was all, he goes, it's refreshing. He has Sirius XM, 2 shows on there. Because it's refreshing not to have a rundown sheet and have all just kind of just go off the cuff and, talk sports and wherever it takes us, it does.
Mm-hmm. Now, why did you pick Greg Polanco of all players? I mean, I know it fits into the Tribe Called Quest song, but why him in particular?
Well, okay, it fits into the phonemic kind of sound of, El Segundo, but I'm a fantasy baseball, rotisserie baseball. That's my favorite fantasy sport by far. I love it. I'm a baseball guy. I always have been. Been collecting baseball cards since I was 3.
Same here.
I love the 5-tool outfielders. I get, all through going back to when I was a kid to, like the Raul Mondesi's or when I was real little, Dwight Evans was like my favorite player growing up, the Eric Davises, and then, Reggie Sanders, Ron Gant, back to the 90s. And then now you got guys like your Starling Martes, the whole Pirates outfield with McCutchen, not so much McCutchen anymore, but Polanco, and Starling Marte, and just guys like that. I always like those 5-tool players, your Mike Camerons back in the day. Nowadays you're like your Mike Taylors, of course your Mike Trouts, but, so I would always overbid on Gregory Polanco. I think he's had 3 full seasons, and every year except this past year, he's gotten a little bit better. And, so I just like him as a player, just one of those players you gravitate to. And, that's why I like the Montreal Expos. They used to have a lot of 5-tool, fun, exciting players, Rondell White, Cliff Lloyd, Tim Raines, Andre Dawson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Larry Walker, guys like that. And then Pedro Martinez, man, me being a Boston fan, come on. So, yeah, I get to talk about all this stuff and just kind of incorporate it into my own put my own little stamp on my own little project here.
Now, was I wearing my Montreal Expos hat the last time you saw me in Vegas? Because I feel like you popped me with that one on purpose.
Probably. I mean, I don't know. My favorite hat is my Montreal Expos hat. Actually, when I was in Vegas last year, 2016, I'm walking into Thursday fight night where Eddie Alvarez beat Dos Anjos, and Ariel Helwani's walking in, and I didn't see him at first, and he goes, "Nice hat," and I look, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" I'm like, "It's Ariel Helwani." I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "I'm a huge fan of the MMA Hour." I was like, I'm a wrestler. He's like, "Oh yeah." I talked to him for like 5 minutes, got my picture taken. I said, "Look, I don't mean to be." He's like, No. He was like the coolest guy, man. We got my picture taken with him, being a huge Montreal Expos fan and New York Knicks fan, in my Montreal Expos hat. So yeah, I always wear that cap. You'll find, wherever I go, you'll probably find me in it.
Well, what's even funnier, I'll tell you a little side story since we're on the topic. We had already interviewed Ariel Helwani on a podcast, and then I went to Montreal to see GSP fight Josh Koscheck at UFC 124, and I bought a Montreal Expos hat at a shop in Montreal because I figured this has got to be the authentic real deal, right? I could order one over the internet or eBay and it wouldn't be a real Expos hat, but I'm in Montreal, so this is the real deal. And I wear my hat to the weigh-ins, and who walks down the aisle right next to me but Ariel Helwani, and he sees that and he stops. So same thing both times for you and for me.
Yeah, I actually met a guy on the show. He's a lawyer, and he's friends with Jonah Carey and all the people that want to bring the Expos back. He's a lawyer in New York, and he has some relation to Montreal, and he's talking to me about Jerry Park and like Rusty Staub and UB Brooks and all these, guys Expos fans would know. I have to gave me his card. I got to get him on the show and we got to talk some Expos.
Absolutely. But hey, since we talked about UFC and Ariel Helwani, you did mention that you've been doing some no-gi grappling and submission. How long ago did you start that? And was that something you did for flexibility as a wrestler, or was it just something you really wanted to get into?
I started actually doing it in 2007 when Gabriel Gonzaga beat Crow Cop, and they said he's from Ludlow, Mass, which is right outside Springfield, which is where I'm from. And I'm like, holy shit. I was like, what the fuck? I mean, there's a top level UFC heavyweight living right down the road. He literally lived, it was literally like 2 minutes from, where I was living. So I started training there for about 6 months or so to help just conditioning. I'd done a little, I had a personal trainer where I'd done some pad work and stuff, and that kept my attention rather than doing, shitty standard gym cardio. So I started there. I went there for about 6 months, and then I stopped just because I was wrestling full time. I was wrestling pretty much 3 times during the week, and it was just I didn't have the money at the time to go more than once or twice a week. But it helped really improve a little bit for that 6 months, improve my in-ring work. So fast forward to 2011, I started training at an MMA place. I just wanted to get back into it. I wanted to make my in-ring work better, and just getting bored of going to the gym. It was boring me. I needed something different. I needed to learn. I love learning, and I wanted to learn jiu-jitsu and grappling and striking. So I've been doing it ever since, and I've have a lot of friends that I've trained with and that trained at my gym. Nick Newell, who was at XFC champ at one point, World Series of Fighting. Yep, he's coming back. He's a good friend of mine. Just was at his wedding last month or 2 months ago in November, and I knew him from the first day I started training there, and he was a big wrestling fan. He was like, "Hey man, I remember you," and blah blah blah. And so a lot of top level fighters here in New England, guys like Matt Bassett, who has been in Bellator and who fought in the UFC Contender Series that was over the summer. So it's not just a cardio kickboxing type of thing. I'm not looking to fight. I just love. I actually just came from grappling class, a little before doing the show, and it's just something that, I do 4 to 5 times a week, and I teach striking and boxing with the kids now that I work with. I'm a special needs PE teacher and health teacher, so I do a lot of that stuff every day. So every day, whether I'm at school, getting in 200 tie kicks on our striking stand, or, hitting the punching bag, or, doing stuff like that, and then going training at night, it helps me out, and it's great exercise. I just love it. It helps in every way. Even when I roll with Tom Lawler, though, he taps me out at will. It's, I by no means am a wizard on the mat. I'm still very, very green, but I'm getting better, and I like getting better, and I like the journey. And, the times I have rolled with Tom, he's been awesome and has, taught me so much. But it just puts you in perspective just how good someone like that is. And, I put in six full years of, some really good training, and just how, high level he is.
Yeah, I got to meet Filthy last year when I was there for the WrestleMania weekend in Dallas, and I was so glad to hear he decided to expand into pro wrestling. I know he kind of was forced into it by his UFC suspension, but that guy had so much charisma with his weigh-in entrances and his fight entrances. I just always thought pro wrestler every time I saw him.
Well, he is a pro, he is a pro wrestling fan. He tried out for WWE in 2006 at FCW, and, he told me, he goes, he smoked the aced the tryout. He was him and another wrestler were the best ones there. I mean, Tom was an All-American, I believe, at Central Florida. So this is a guy that has been amateur wrestling his whole life at a very, very high level, and then transitioning into UFC. So, he wanted to get into wrestling first, and I was just talking to him the other day, and he was sending me some clips against Tracy Williams and Louis Linden, and I watch a lot of his matches. Just watched a match he had at Beyond with another friend of mine who's a MMA fighter turned pro wrestler, and Chuck O'Neal.
Oh yeah, Cold Steel Chuck O'Neal. I've interviewed him.
Cold Steel Chuck O'Neal. Yep, lives about an hour away from here. So another New England guy, and we're all from New England actually. But watched Tom's match on MLW against Matt Riddle, and he'll send me a lot of his matches, and you missed it, man. I got to work with Tom at the Observer convention for Future Stars.
I wish I'd been there. When I heard that happened, I was so sad I missed it.
Yeah, I wish you guys were there, man. It would have been, you would have enjoyed it, because it was, if you're not an Observer fan and you're watching it from just a straight wrestling standpoint, it's a good match, but it's not like if you're a wrestling Observer fan and the backstory with Brian and Tom and just throw me in there, and then they didn't expect me to be doing the Santell character, so it really got a huge pop when the match started. So it was fun. It was a guy. I can send you the match if you want to see it.
Absolutely.
The controversial ending and whatnot.
Yeah, Brian throwing the super kick at the end, right?
Yeah, so, well, don't give it away, but
sorry.
Not that.
Well, I can bleep that part out if you want.
No, please. There's nobody listening to this show that probably doesn't listen to Observer that knows what happened in that match.
That's true. That's how I heard about it. I heard about Brian throwing that super kick and stuffing the $10 in there. So I was like, yeah, I missed out on a good one.
Beautiful fucking super kick. Beautiful super kick.
Well, he is a pro, so he should know how to throw one, especially since Shawn and Ric Flair are his two favorites. So he can bump and he can throw a super kick. Those are the two things I know he can do.
No, Brian's a good worker, man. Brian's, I've never been in the ring with him, but, I was friends with Buddy Wayne, and Buddy told me some great things. And I was in the ring with Buddy Wayne, with Buddy and his guys a little bit. So if Brian's anything like him, he's light, he's smooth, and he's a night off.
Well, it's kind of breaking my heart that we bring up Buddy Wayne, because he's a former guest of this show as well. So I was very sad when he passed away, and I still miss him. I listened to those old shows, and I remember how fun it was and how much it made me a fan of Wrestling Observer listening to him and Brian go back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, it sucked. I talked to Buddy the night before he passed, and just out of nowhere, and it's different. 50. I guess he's on. Only 50, and just it's weird when you don't see someone. You see someone a couple times a year, and they're on the other coast. Until you get there. Until I got there for the the funeral and the ceremony and everything. It doesn't really hit you, but the school is still going. And I just talked to my friend Randy, who's really helping Shauna, his wife, and Nick, his son. They're doing a lot better, and the school is really, really doing good. And Rip did a seminar there last month or 2 months ago, really brought the school together, and things have been, all thumbs up.
That's good. I'm glad in his memory it's continuing on, and I know the next generation of great wrestlers from the Pacific Northwest will be coming out of the Buddy Wayne Wrestling Academy.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely. Well, that's the only really place. It's really the only place I know up there in the Pacific Northwest. That's not, that's in America in that area. You got ECCW in Canada, and you got, I think Tim Flowers might be training guys, but aside from that, the Buddy Wayne's place is the place to go.
Right on. So, in his memory, it will continue to produce great talent. But, we don't want to end this on a somber note. Let's make it uplifting. Let's do some plugs. Yes. Let's do some promoting. Let's do some happy things. Let's get all the information out there where everybody can see the new and improved Thomas Santell.
Yeah, well, nothing yet, this month. Kind of a slow month wrestling wise, busy month, real life. But, February 23rd, you can catch me in Boston, Mass for Big Time Wrestling. And then the next week, is March 2nd, I think it's in West Virginia. And then March 3rd, you can go to the Big Time Wrestling. I think it's BTW Wrestling Pro. Just search Big Time Wrestling on Facebook or, online. And, they have the dates there. But I pretty much do all their shows. They're great shows. They bring in, they had, one of his retirement matches, earlier, back in September, and they bring in, a ton of stars, the Stings, the Ric Flairs, and then, great, guys for the casual fans, and then guys like, your Eddie Edwards, your Chris Dickinsons, guys like myself and the Slick Wagner Browns, and, guys who are going to put on good solid matches as well. As do a lot of the guys they bring in, like Billy Gunn and still working their ass off, Gangrel. So it's a great mix of everything. Go check it out at, BTW Pro, Big Time Wrestling. And then that is, March 2nd, 3rd, and then February 23rd, and then March 4th, speaking of Slick Wagner Brown, his Test the Strength promotion in Connecticut, Thomas Santell will be performing there. And then, you can go to @RetroGrappler on Instagram and Twitter. I'm pretty much been busy with my Twitter and the podcast Instagram for promoting the show. But, as soon as the shows get closer, I'm going to post on, Thomas Santell, Twitter and Instagram, which you can find @RetroGrappler. And then you can find me on Twitter @PromiseThomas, and you can find I Left My Wallet and Greg Polanco on Instagram @LeftMyWallet23. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Had Disco Inferno on this past week. I've had Conrad Thompson. I had Dave on recently. Another Observer favorite, Max Smashmaster. I've had Tommy Dreamer, Joey Ryan, Rip Rogers. Whole bunch of OVW guys from when I was there. Rob Conway, Johnny Jeter, Ken Doan. Big list, and I'm going to keep getting guests like that. As we go forward, have a lot of great fantasy and sports analysts on there as well. So check it out. I Left My Wallet and Greg Polanco. Give it a listen. And, if you're used to hearing Dave talk about UFC and wrestling, I think you're going to really like the, chat I had with him, which, had some of that in there, but had a lot of sports as well.
Yeah, I heard you got him to go a little off topic and reminisce about some of his greatest favorite athletes from when he was growing up.
That's what my show is about, man. It's about, we're going to talk a little wrestling, but we're going to, we're talking sports.
Well, next time we got to flip the script and completely not talk about wrestling, and we'll just talk about sports next time. How does that sound?
Absolutely, man. I'm always down to talk either. So you just tell me when, Stevie.
All right, I appreciate it. Thomas Santell, who we also know as Promise Thomas, but either way, be sure to follow I Left My Wallet and Greg Polanco, and follow him on Twitter as well. Thomas, thank you so much.
Thanks, Stevie. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Jason, what did you think of our interview tonight with Thomas Santell, a.k.a. Antonio the Promised Thomas. Jason, you still there? Oh, his mic won't unmute. Live internet. Hey, I think his mic unmuted. Are you there? I hear you typing now.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, now it unmuted. Hey, here we are. Yeah,
well,
we edit that dead air out.
Yeah, we were just saying.
Like to edit.
This is great now. This is exactly what Thomas was talking about. We're just letting it hang. This happened all live on the show, and you're going to hear it now.
Like, there was a tow truck outside, so I put the microphone on mute, and then I couldn't unmute it when you got off the line with Antonio Thomas there. So, well, yeah, I mean, he had some interesting takes there on Japan and on mixed martial arts and on George McFly.
Yes, and I definitely want to subscribe to I Left My Wallet and Greg Polanco after he ran down that list of names. I'd heard a few of the people he had on, but I didn't realize just how extensive the list was until he did the breakdown. And hey, considering we're on iTunes too, that's a great place to get all your wrestling podcasts. You can subscribe to Angry Marks, you can subscribe to I Left My Wallet and Greg Polanco, and I'm sure you can recommend a few other podcasts that people could subscribe to.
Indeed, and yeah, the fact that he was just mentioning that he liked the Pittsburgh Pirates outfield just kind of blew my mind there. It's like, wow, other people from outside of Pittsburgh know who's in the Pittsburgh Pirates outfield. My goodness.
That's why I mentioned it in chat today before the show. I was like, the fact that he named his podcast I Left My Wallet and Greg Polanco, I knew that was going to pop you.
Yeah, and yeah, it's not even like Starling Marte, or it's not like he's one of the higher profile Pittsburgh Pirates either, but.
Yeah, I actually had to look up his stat line before the show because I was like, I know the name, but I don't know that much about him because I'm not a huge Pirates fan and I don't live in Pittsburgh. And I looked it up and it's like 49 career home runs. That was the one thing that stuck out to me out of all his stats. 49.
Well, if we get Antonio Thomas to come back on the show, we'll have to ask him if, like George McFly, if he is a sci-fi fan, being that we're both huge fans of sci-fi.
I have a very good feeling we could get into an in-depth conversation about just about anything, including sci-fi with Mr. Thomas. And that's part of the reason that, I'm such good friends with him, because we've had those conversations in Vegas, and some of them we don't even remember because we were both drinking at the time.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Except at an Observer convention. Then it ends up all over the internet.
Yay, internet.
All right. Well, before we go, Jason, anything else you want to talk about from New Japan or in wrestling news?
Yeah. I've heard about it again. This is something I don't watch because it's WWE, but what's your take on the mixed tag brackets coming together?
Oh, you mean the Mixed Match Challenge that's going to air on Facebook Watch?
Yeah, that thing.
Well, I'm gonna give it a chance just simply because it's on my radar and it's not like I have to pay to watch it. It's just part of Facebook, so it's not like it's an extra show that I have to subscribe to.
It's not even like having to pay for the network.
Right, exactly.
Or cable.
Yeah.
It's more content that's out there to be consumed.
Well, it's interesting, though, that they're actually cutting into 205 Live for this content. So they're doing it free on Facebook, and they're making 205 Live 20 minutes shorter.
So 205 Live is just going to end, but is 205 Live on Facebook now, or is that still just on the network?
No, see, what they're going to do is, like, in the United States, there will be 20 minutes...
They're going to cut off 205 Live on the network.
Yeah.
And then once it's off on the network, they're going to start it on Facebook. That's stupid.
Yeah. They're actually... I'll give you the full breakdown here. It'll be like from 10:02 to 10:25, it'll be on Facebook, and then 10:25 to 10:55 will be 205 Live on the WWE Network. Now, in the UK, they're actually going to get both shows on the network because they don't have Facebook Watch in that region. It's geo-blocked or something. But I assume here in the United States, they'll just do like 20 minutes of filler programming on the network until 205 Live comes on.
Gotta love WWE.
But as to your original question, these teams are, I mean, some of them make sense because some of them are real-life couples. Like Naomi and Jimmy Uso, okay, that one I can understand. But then you got, like, you know, Sami Zayn and Becky Lynch. A babyface and a heel. what? And that's a lot of these teams. It's like a baby face and a heel. It's like, okay, we have to accept that in the WWE universe, this is now another universe. It's like we're doing Inception here, a universe inside a universe inside a universe.
Yeah, forget existing storylines. This is its own separate thing.
Right, and we just gotta pretend that everything on Mixed Match Challenge has literally nothing to do with the rest of WWE. But then we can't, because The Miz cuts promos on Raw saying how awesome it is that Asuka is his partner, and Asuka is undefeated, which means he's going to win Mixed Match Challenge because she'll never be beaten. So, it is part of the WWE Universe. Ah!
Oh, if only she would turn on him and just beat the ever-loving piss out of him.
Yeah, put him in the Asuka lock, please.
There's a heel turn I'd like to see more than Yoshihashi turning heel.
Right, I know. But I think the weirdest one of all, and you know they did this on purpose, is Braun Strowman and Alexa Bliss. It's like, let's take the absolute biggest guy on our entire roster and put him with the absolute tiniest woman.
That would be, it'd be like the reverse if he took like Nia Jax and Kalisto.
Or Nia Jax and Enzo.
Yeah, Enzo's not, he's a cruiserweight, but he's not Kalisto small.
No, that's true. He probably is a little bigger, but, you know, in terms of his storyline position, it's a little smaller. He's probably one of those people that's looking at the fact 205 Live got its time cut and being like, bro, are you serious? This is my show.
How you doing?
You know, I actually, total segue here, but since we talked about sports earlier with Thomas, I feel like this is a funny segue. I flipped through XM radio the other day when I was in the car with my wife, and we came across this guy doing a sports radio talk show named Ryan Rusciello. I'd never heard him before, but he sounded like Enzo meets Taz meets an Italian stereotype. And this guy was screaming at the top of his lungs on satellite radio. He's screaming, bro, are you telling me that they're saying that LeVar Ball is not going to play for the Lakers and we can't talk about it? Are you kidding me? It was like, what am I listening to? Is this stand-up comedy or is this guy for real?
It'd be great if it was just a complete troll.
I seriously thought it was for a couple of minutes. I'm like, this must be a put-on. This must be a guy doing an Italian
That's
accent.
not his real voice. That can't be his real voice.
But then I listened to him for another 4 or 5 minutes, and he never broke character. So I'm like, oh my god, this really must be this guy's real voice and the way he talks. It was like Taz on steroids.
It's like Taz meets Enzo meets what's his name, Vince Russo.
Exactly. Yeah, this is the kind of guy who would call everybody bro and call every woman a diva. Not a diva, a diva. Diva. But on that note, we will go ahead and wrap it up, and I'll just say, Mixed Match Challenge, I could take it or leave it. If it sucks, it won't hurt my feelings. If it's good, I'll be surprised.
That's kind of how I feel about most of WWE.
I know. You are not the biggest WWE fan, but it makes me.
I'm not, and it's great seeing the rest of the world coming around to my position now. It's great that the rest of the world is catching up to me finally.
Well, you know what? 25,000 new subscribers on New Japan World prove you right with that, because they drew in huge new numbers off the strength of this card for Wrestle Kingdom 12. So even if you were disappointed with the booking, it turned out really good for them.
Imagine that. Wrestling fans want
wrestling. Not sports entertainment. Imagine that. So, let's wrap it up with some plugs. We already had Thomas Santell give his plugs. Jason, let's hear yours.
I'm going to give an anti-plug first because I am sick of seeing this shit pop up in my Facebook feed. I'm going to have Will Huckabee come and hunt anybody down who puts that goddamn Swiffer wet jet as antifreeze that kills your pets and your babies if they lick their feet after walking on a floor that's been cleaned with a Swiffer. Go to Snopes, that has been debunked, and do not post that shit on your Facebook wall for the love of God. That is my public service announcement. What will I plug? New Japan World, njpwworld.com, best 999 yen you can spend a month. I'll plug AngryMarks.com. I will also plug WrestleCrap.com. They did hit their, $250 goal, so they will be doing podcasts every month. And I think they're working towards some kind of stretch goal now. I'll plug Abby at Abby A on Twitter, and you can find her writing at Top Rope Press. I'm find writing on New Japan and other wrestling there. And I think that's about it for my plugs.
What? You're not going to plug veggiebending.wordpress.com?
Yeah, you can check my cooking blog, veggiebending.wordpress.com. It hasn't been updated, but if you haven't seen it yet, it's new to you.
Exactly. Just like watching reruns. So go check it out right now. And as for my cheap plugs, AngryMarks.com on YouTube, DOTCOM. Watch all of our videos, even the ones that are unmonetized, like the hustler Rip Rogers, because, like I said with Thomas, you can't do a show with him and bleep him out. So YouTube said, no, this one is not suitable for advertisers, but I don't care. I'm leaving it up because Rip Rogers is a great man.
I would love to hear Antonio Thomas talk to Rip Rogers about the Young Bucks. That is a conversation I want to hear.
Now, if they didn't have that conversation on that episode of I Left My Wallet in Greg Polanco, I will PM him on Twitter and tell him, get Rip back on, and let's get Rip Rogers to talk about the Young Bucks. I just want to hear how many F-bombs he'd drop in 10 seconds.
That would be one long bleep, except, yeah, he doesn't bleep his podcast because he likes it raw like that.
Just like we do, which is why my final plug is subscribe to the Angry Marks podcast on iTunes, keyword Angry Marks, and follow me on Twitter at Angry Marks. This is Thursday Night AMP for my co-host Jason, aka Great Sudoku, and myself, Stevie J, and our guest, Thomas Santell, aka Antonio the Promised Thomas. Thank you for listening, and go subscribe to I Left My Wallet in Greg Polanco. Good night, everybody.